The pen was already in her hand. Simone Adeyemi had been a professional for 6 years. She knew how to hold herself in rooms like this. 22nd floor, floor-to-ceiling glass, Lake Michigan flat and gray in the distance. She knew how to sit across from people who had more money than she'd earned in a decade and act like the space between them was nothing. She had learned that from the job, from necessity. The contract was 41 pages. She had read it twice. The terms were right. The timeline was right. $340,000 for interior design consultation on a mixed-use development in Southside Chicago, the largest single project of her career. All she had to do was sign the last page. She flipped to it. Under the line that read Principal Developer, in clean black print were 3 words she had not seen in 14 months. Do-Hyun Kang. The pen stopped. Not because the name frightened her. She was going to sign, she knew that. The work was real, the opportunity was real. But the name pulled at something anyway. It always did. She set the pen down, looked out at the lake, gave herself 30 seconds. Then she picked the pen back up, and before she signed, she let herself go back to the beginning. To the morning, she walked onto a construction site and met a man she thought was a laborer. To 9 months, she was only now learning to see clearly. To one decision, made for the wrong reasons, that took 14 months to stop paying for. This is that story. Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I read every single one. If you haven't subscribed yet, stay right here. This story has 5 layers. Most people don't see the last one coming. Don't miss it. The alarm on Do-Hyun Kang's phone was set for 4:53 a.m., not 4:50, not 4:53, because his father had told him once that a man who rounds his schedule to the nearest 5 minutes is already negotiating with himself before the day starts. Do-Hyun had been waking at 4:53 for 11 years. He didn't need the alarm anymore. His body had learned the hour the way it had learned everything his father taught him, not through understanding but through repetition, until the lesson became reflex. He was out the door by 5:14. The truck was a 2016 Ford Transit, gray, 112,000 miles on the odometer. A long scratch ran along the rear passenger door from a rebar incident 3 years ago that he'd never bothered to fix. He drove south on the Dan Ryan through a city still mostly dark, past gas stations and the blue flicker of overnight convenience stores, until the skyline sat in his rearview mirror like something that belonged to someone else. The Harrington District project occupied a full city block on South Paulina Street. 8 stories, mixed use. Commercial on the first 2 floors, residential above, a courtyard or green space threaded through the center. The permit board on the chain-link fence listed the principal developer as Kang Meridian Group. For the first time in the company's 11-year history, the name on that board was Do-Hyun Kang. His crew was already there when he pulled through the gate at 5:31. 2 of them on a concrete block with coffees, a third walking the eastern perimeter with a flashlight. "Morning, D." He nodded. "Give me 10 minutes. Then let's walk the 3rd floor column placement." He went into the site trailer, spread the structural drawings across the folding table, and stood under the fluorescent light. He moved his finger along the load-bearing lines slowly, not looking for something specific, just looking, the way his father had taught him to look at anything that mattered. His father, Kang Sung-gil, had come to Chicago in 1987 with $340 in his pocket and a cousin's address on a folded napkin. 6 years as a welder, then site supervisor, then foreman. By 1994, he understood something that took most people much longer to see. The construction industry in the Midwest was not controlled by the companies with the best work. It was controlled by the people who decided which companies got the work. He built a network, methodically, quietly. Relationships with city inspectors, bid committee members, the men who drafted specs for public contracts. No violence, no threats, just information, access, and the patient accumulation of leverage. By 2003, no contractor in Cook, DuPage, or Lake County could win a significant public bid without moving through a channel that Kang Sung-gil controlled. Sophisticated, durable, completely illegal. When Sung-gil was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2018 and given 14 months, he sat in his study in Hyde Park and looked at what he had built, really looked at it, and said one thing to his son: "I built walls so you wouldn't have to ask permission. Now tear them down properly. Don't just walk away. Clean it up." Do-Hyun had been 24. He spent the next 4 years doing exactly that. Unwinding contracts, dissolving holding structures, redirecting capital into legitimate development, buying out leverage quietly so it couldn't be used by anyone else. It was slower than inheriting it, harder than keeping it. He was not finished. But Harrington was the clearest proof of where he was going. A real project, under his real name, in the neighborhood his father had spent 30 years extracting value from. Something given back, finally. 9 months earlier, Simone Adeyemi had walked onto this same site carrying a portfolio case and the slightly overdressed confidence of someone who'd dressed for the meeting she wanted rather than the construction site she was actually entering. Her firm had been contracted for interior design consultation on the shared spaces. She had read the brief 3 times on the L ride down. Do-hyun had been walking the eastern frame when she arrived. Hard hat, work boots, a flannel shirt with a tear along the left cuff he hadn't noticed. He saw a woman in clean clothes trying to figure out which trailer to enter and pointed her toward the right one. "Thank you," she said. "Site manager's inside," he said. "He'll get you set up." She went in. He went back to the frame. What came after was slower and more ordinary than either of them would have predicted. A shared lunch on a concrete block 3 weeks in. Conversations about the courtyard design that ran longer than they needed to. A number exchanged. A dinner in Pilsen that turned into 2 hours after the plates were cleared, just talking. The way people talk when they are surprised by how much they have to say to each other. By February, they were in Wicker Park. A 2-bedroom on Damen, 3rd floor. Radiator heat that ticked all night. It was good. For a while, it was genuinely good. The first sign was so small she couldn't have named it at the time. One evening in late March, Do-hyun's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. Something moved in his expression, just for a second. He stepped out onto the balcony and slid the door closed. Simone was washing dishes. She wasn't trying to listen, but the apartment was small, and she heard his voice change, not louder, not angrier, slower. The particular stillness of someone who has shifted into a register that has nothing to do with the conversation they were having 5 minutes ago. 90 seconds. He came back inside. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Business," he said. He picked up his coffee, went back to the drawings. She didn't ask again. Not that night, but she remembered. 3 weeks later, Claire Osi sent a link to Marcus Webb's Instagram with one message. "Okay, but his life though." Simone laughed, clicked through. River North Penthouse. A weekend in Miami. A table at Alinea. The curated aesthetic of a man who understood that other people's perception of him was itself a kind of capital. She was still looking at the screen when she glanced up and saw Do-hyun across the room, bent over his drawings under the desk lamp, flannel shirt, hair 2 weeks past needing a cut, a cold cup of coffee forgotten at his elbow. The smile didn't disappear, but something shifted behind it. The thing that happens when you stop seeing someone with your own eyes and start seeing them through someone else's. Without realizing you've made the switch, Do-hyun looked up. He saw her face. He didn't say anything. One quiet moment. Then he looked back down at the drawings. He had seen it. She knew he had. Neither of them said a word about it. What Simone didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that the man sitting under that lamp had 4 lawyers, 2 holding companies, and a real estate portfolio that her entire firm's annual billings couldn't match in 8 years of work. But that was not the thing that mattered. What mattered was simpler and harder and would take her much longer to understand. He had seen the look on her face, and he had chosen in that moment to say nothing. Not because he didn't care, because he did. The invitation came on a Thursday. Simone's firm, Aldridge & Park Interior Studio, had been nominated for a Design Excellence Award by the Chicago Architecture Foundation. The ceremony was at the Meridian Club, 41st floor of the Wyndham Grand on Michigan Avenue. Black tie optional. The kind of event where the people in the room were less interested in the award than in who else was in the room. Simone told Do-hyun over dinner. She was careful about how she said it. "I'll come," he said. "It's black tie optional. I know what that means." The night of the event, he came out of the bedroom in dark trousers and a plain black shirt. No jacket, no tie. Clean, simple, and in the wrong room, invisible. Simone was in a deep green gown and her mother's earrings. She looked at him. He looked at her. "Ready?" he said. She said yes. She did not say what she was thinking. The Meridian Club had high ceilings, low lighting, and the particular acoustics of expensive carpet absorbing expensive conversation. Simone moved through the room the way she had learned to move through rooms like this, purposeful, warm, present. She introduced Do-hyun to colleagues, a partner at a rival firm, the director of a nonprofit they'd done pro bono work for. He shook hands, answered questions when asked, did not initiate. She felt it, the slight friction of bringing someone into a room they didn't belong to and watching them not try. What she didn't know was that the Meridian Club was where Kang Sung-il had held his most important meetings for 17 years. A private dining room, always reserved under a different name. Inspectors, committee members, the informal architecture of 3 counties' construction contracts, quietly maintained across 2 decades. At least 2 people in the room that night had done business with the Kang network directly. If Do-hyun had walked in wearing a suit, standing in the way that announces arrival rather than obscures it, those 2 men would have recognized him within 20 minutes. And everything he had spent 4 years dismantling would have had a name attached to it again. He wore the black shirt because it was the only armor he had that didn't look like armor. Simone didn't know any of this. She knew only what she could see, and 40 minutes into the evening, what she could see was Marcus Webb. He came in with 2 men from a North Shore development firm, smile already in place, hand extended before he'd crossed the threshold. Charcoal suit fitted correctly. He moved through the room like he had always been there. He knew 3 people by first name within 5 minutes. He laughed at the right moment, leaned in at the right moment, never once stood still long enough to look uncertain. Then she turned, a colleague steering her toward the awards section, and as she turned, she looked back at Do-hyun. He was standing near the window, alone, cradling a glass of water, watching the city the way a person watches something they are not part of. She turned away. She did not look back again. On the cab ride home, she said nothing for 12 blocks. Then, "You didn't have to come if you didn't want to. I wanted to come. You barely talked to anyone. I talked to the people you introduced me to. That's not the same thing." She looked out the window. "I want to understand what you're building. That's all. I want to know what we're building." He didn't answer right away. Michigan Avenue moved past in streaks of light. "I'm building something," Do-hyun said. "It just doesn't look like anything yet." She nodded, looked out the window. That was not what she needed to hear. 2 weeks later, she drove to Evanston. Ruth Adeyemi had kept her house immaculate for 19 years, ever since Simone's father moved out, and she decided the house would not reflect what had happened in it. She cooked on Sunday afternoons whether anyone was coming or not. She asked one question about the man her daughter was seeing, and it was always the same. "Is he kind to you?" Simone had always said yes, and meant it. This Sunday, Ruth stood at the stove stirring jollof rices and asked it differently. "When you try to picture what he's working toward, what do you see?" Simone opened her mouth and found she didn't have a clear answer. Ruth didn't push, she just nodded slowly, the way she nodded when something confirmed a thought she'd been sitting with. She handed Simone a bowl. They ate in the warm kitchen with the Sunday traffic outside, and Ruth said nothing more. But Simone drove home with the question still open in her chest. "What do you see?" The conversation at the kitchen table happened on a Wednesday in April. Do-hyun was at the drawings when she came home. He looked up. He saw her face. The particular stillness of someone who has made a decision and is carrying it from one room to the next. She sat down across from him. She had prepared what she wanted to say, and she said it without cruelty. Clearly, fairly, the way someone speaks when they have thought about something long enough that the emotion has gone quiet and only the truth remains. The last thing she said was, "I need someone who's building something visible. Not someone who's comfortable being invisible." Do-hyun listened to all of it. He did not interrupt when she finished one question. Quiet, almost gentle. "Is that what you think I am?" She didn't answer. The silence did. He stood, walked into the study. She heard a desk drawer open, a sound she'd heard once before, months ago, late at night when she thought she was asleep. A pause. Then the drawer closed again without anything being taken out. He came to the doorway. "I'm going to call Jin-soo." "Okay," she said. She went to the bedroom and began to pack. Jin-soo arrived in 20 minutes, coat still on, carrying nothing. He read the room from the doorway before stepping fully through it. Do-hyun was in the dark study, no lamp. Through the glass panel, Jin-soo could see the light under the bedroom door. Simone still moving. He sat down across from Do-hyun, said nothing, waited. The bedroom door opened. Simone came out with a bag over one shoulder. She paused when she saw Jin-soo. She looked at Do-hyun through the study glass, one moment, long enough, and then she walked to the front door. Jin-soo listened to her footsteps on the stairs. Then quiet. Do-hyun sat with his hands flat on the desk, the way his father had taught him to sit when he needed to think rather than feel. He did not turn the lamp on. He did not reach for his phone. Jin-soo stayed. He didn't stop her. He didn't explain. Not because he had nothing to say, but because some explanations require a person to be ready to hear them. That night she wasn't. Neither was he. 3 months passed the way bad decisions pass. Not all at once, but in small increments, each one reasonable enough on its own that you don't notice the accumulation until you're somewhere you didn't plan to be. Simone moved into a one-bedroom in Logan Square. She told herself it was temporary. She unpacked her books and her good dishes and her drafting lamp and stopped calling it temporary after the 3rd week. Marcus made it easy, at first. He knew the right restaurants, not the loudest or the most expensive, but the ones with the right light, the right noise level, the kind of room that made whatever conversation you were having feel more significant than it was. He remembered small things, the name of the project she was working on, that she took her coffee with oat milk, that she hated being late. He created the impression of attention. And for someone who had spent 9 months with a man who gave real attention so quietly, it was easy to mistake for absence. The impression felt like the thing itself. She did not examine that too closely. By the 2nd month, she had learned not to ask about money. Not because Marcus deflected, exactly. More that the conversation always shifted, smoothly and without obvious effort, before it arrived at anything specific. He talked about deals in progress, about a development in River North he was positioning, about contacts and momentum and opportunity. The vocabulary of someone on the way up. Claire had her own vocabulary for it. "He talks about money the way people talk about weight loss," she said over lunch. "Always about to happen, never quite has." Simone laughed. "That's not fair. I'm an accountant. I hear how people describe their finances. The way he describes his doesn't have a structure. It has a vibe." She stabbed a piece of lettuce. "Vibes don't file taxes." Simone let it go, but she kept it. Meanwhile, across the city, something had quietly changed. Do-hyun had told Jin-soo in the 2nd week of May that he wanted Kang Meridian's name on every public filing connected to Harrington, Not just the permit board, but the planning commission documents, the city contract registry, his own name, not a holding company shell buried on page 11. Jinsu asked once if he was sure. My father hid because he had to protect what he'd built, Do-hyun said. I've been hiding because I'm afraid of what it means to stop. Those aren't the same reasons. Jinsu was quiet. Then he opened his laptop. The filings went through by the end of the month. No announcement, no press release. Just a name, in the correct fields, on documents anyone could access if they knew where to look. Claire Osei knew where to look. She found it on a Tuesday while running a routine background check for a client. Not looking for Do-hyun, not expecting anything. She typed a search into the Illinois Business Registry and his name came back on the fourth result. She clicked through, then kept clicking. She sat at her desk for 4 minutes without moving. Then she called Simone. I need you to look at something. Don't say anything until you've seen it. Can it wait until... It cannot wait. The groundbreaking ceremony for the Lakeview South development was held on a Thursday afternoon on Belmont Avenue in a white tent with catered food and a podium with the ward alderman's seal. Marcus had been chasing this project for 11 weeks. The developer, a private equity group from New York, had not committed. This was his last real opportunity to get in front of the right people. He brought up Simone because she had actual project credits, and having her in the room made his pitch more credible. He had not said this directly. She understood it anyway. She came because she was still trying. She accepted a glass of sparkling water and stood beside Marcus while he scanned the room, cataloging, calculating. There, he said quietly, nodding toward the left side of the tent. A man near the alderman from Ward 17 and 2 men she didn't recognize. His back was to her, dark jacket, plain. No lanyard, nothing to indicate who he was, and yet the alderman was listening with the particular attentiveness of someone who knows the conversation matters. Then he turned slightly. Simone's hand tightened around her glass. Do-hyun? He hadn't seen her. He was still talking. Something technical, the way his hands moved over structural specifics. The 2 men from New York were leaning in, deciding whether to trust him. Marcus had clocked him too. That's the Kang rep. I need to get in front of them before they lock in with the alderman. Come on. He moved. Simone followed, 2 steps behind. Marcus reached Jinsu first and opened with the full warmth of his professional smile. The pitch lasted 4 minutes. Simone stood slightly behind, watching Jinsu's face. Jinsu listened without expression. When Marcus finished, 1 beat of silence passed. Not hesitation, decision, and Jinsu set his glass down. The proposal from Webb Realty Associates, he said, at a volume the surrounding cluster could hear without effort, contains material misrepresentations on pages 4, 9, and 17 regarding asset valuation methodology. Kang Meridian doesn't advance submissions that misrepresent fundamentals. He picked his glass back up. We'll pass. He turned back to the contractor beside him. No anger. No drama. The kind of dismissal that is worse than anger because it carries no heat. Just a statement of fact, delivered in front of 4 people whose opinions Marcus needed, and then set aside like a matter already closed. The 2 men from New York exchanged a glance that Simone caught and Marcus didn't. Marcus's smile was still technically on his face, but something underneath had gone rigid. The particular stillness of a man recalculating very quickly what the last 4 minutes had cost him. Simone looked across the tent. Do-hyun was still with the alderman, still talking. He had not looked in her direction, not once. She stood in the white tent with the sound of other people's conversations moving around her, and understood all at once the difference between a man who performed confidence and a man who had no need to perform anything at all. She had spent 3 months choosing the performance. She had spent 9 months not seeing what was standing right in front of her. She held it together for the rest of the event. She had a lot of practice. She had spent 3 months convincing herself she'd made the right choice. Standing in that tent, she understood, for the first time, that conviction and correctness are not the same thing. Claire was waiting outside the tent. She had a screenshot pulled up on her phone, the Illinois Business Registry listing for Kang Meridian Group, and she held it out before Simone had fully reached her. Just read it, Claire said. Simone read it. Kang Meridian Group, registered 1994, Cook County. Principal Officer, Do-hyun Kang. Active holdings, 47 commercial and mixed-use properties across Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. Total assessed portfolio value on the most recent filing, $312 million. Simone handed the phone back. That could be a different Do-hyun Kang, age 29, principal address Hyde Park, Chicago. Claire tapped the screen. That's not a different one. Simone looked at the tent behind her. At the aldermen still visible through the open flap, still in conversation. At the 2 New York developers. At the easy, unhurried way Do-hyun stood among them. She walked out to the site perimeter. The Lakeview South construction fence ran the length of the block, orange mesh on steel posts, the usual permit board bolted near the entrance. She stood in front of it without fully deciding to. The board listed the project name, the contractor, the engineering firm, the timeline. At the bottom, under principal developer, Kang Meridian Group, Do-hyun Kang. She had been to dozens of sites. She had read dozens of permit boards. She had read this one when they arrived the way she always did, out of professional habit without expectation. She had not read this name. She had not been looking for it. She stood at the fence for a long moment. The construction equipment was still. The late afternoon light came in flat and even, the way it does in October in Chicago before the clouds close in. A single hard hat hung on a post nearby, orange, turning slowly in the wind. Then she went back inside. She found Do-hyun in the hallway between the tent and the building entrance, moving toward the exit with Jin-soo 2 steps behind. She crossed the room without thinking about it. He saw her when she was 6 feet away. He stopped. "I need 1 minute," she said. He looked at Jin-soo's. Jin-soo moved forward without being asked, continuing toward the exit, giving them the hallway. 30 seconds of quiet, the noise of the tent behind them. The sound of the city through the glass doors ahead. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. He looked at her, not angry, not satisfied. The particular exhaustion of someone who has held something heavy for a long time and is no longer surprised by the weight. "You didn't ask what I was building, Simone," he said. "You asked why I wasn't showing it. Those are different questions." She opened her mouth, closed it. He held her gaze for one more moment. Then he walked toward the exit. He did not look back. She stood in the hallway for a while after he left. She didn't know how long. Eventually, she went to find Marcus. He was near the bar, recalibrated, already in conversation with a different developer. A smaller fish, a fallback, the pivot of a man who has been in enough rooms to know when a room is done with him. He looked up when she approached. He read her face quickly, the way he read everything, and made the decision to smile. "Ready to go?" he said. "Yeah," she said. "I'm ready." In the car, she looked out the window. He talked. She answered when it was necessary. By the time they reached Logany Square, she had decided 2 things: that she was going to end it with Marcus and that she was going to do it that night. She did. He didn't fight it as hard as she expected. She thought about that afterward, whether it said something about what they had been to each other or whether Marcus Webb simply understood, on some instinctual level, when leverage was gone. She sat alone in her apartment at 11:47 p.m. and did not know what to do with her hands. She got in her car. She didn't drive anywhere in particular. She ended up in a parking structure on Wabash, 3rd level facing east. The lake was a dark line at the end of the grid. The city moved below in its ordinary way. Buses, headlights, people walking fast because Chicago in October does not encourage you to walk slow. She called her mother. Ruth answered on the second ring, which meant she had been awake. She always said she slept well. She almost never did. "Tell me," Ruth said. Simone told her. All of it, the groundbreaking, the permit board, the hallway, the 30 seconds, the question she'd asked and the answer she'd gotten. She told it in the flat, careful voice she used when she was not yet ready to feel the full size of what she was describing. Ruth listened without interrupting. When Simone finished, the line was quiet for a moment. Then Ruth said, "Can I tell you something I've never told you?" Simone waited. "When you were 8 years old, I ended things with a man. You never met him. His name was Gerald. He was an electrician. Union Southside, worked long hours, hands like a working man's hands, old car, didn't talk much about himself." She paused. "I thought he didn't have ambition. I thought quiet meant settled. I left him for your father, and you know how that ended." Simone said nothing. 15 years later, I was reading the Tribune. "Do you remember when we still got the paper?" And there was a profile of a contractor who had just been awarded a $40 million city infrastructure contract, Gerald Reeves. He still drove himself to the sites every morning. Another pause. "Shorter, I'm not telling you this, so you feel sorry for me. I made my choice. I lived with it. I'm telling you because I'm watching you make the same mistake I made, looking at a person through other people's eyes instead of your own, deciding what someone is worth based on what they show instead of what they build. Baby." Her voice was quieter now, almost gentle. "You confused quiet with empty. That's not the same thing. It never was." The line stayed open. Neither of them spoke. Outside, the October wind was moving through the parking structure in long, low passes. Rain had started, not hard, just present, the kind of rain that doesn't ask anything of you, just falls. Simone did not start the car. She sat in the dark with her phone in her lap and let the rain come down on the windshield, small rivers of it, branching and rejoining, finding their way down the glass by whatever path was available to them. She did not wipe them away. She sat. What happened next wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't forgiveness wrapped in a clean ending. It was something harder than both. The slow, unglamorous work of understanding what you actually lost and deciding, in the quiet of a parking garage on Wabash at midnight, who you want to be after. The investigation into Marcus Webb's financial filings was opened by the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation on a Wednesday in February, 5 months after the groundbreaking on Belmont Avenue. It was not a dramatic thing. There was no arrest, no perp walk, no moment of public reckoning caught on camera. There was a letter, then a freeze on 3 accounts, then a notice to his broker. The findings were specific. $847,000 in real estate assets had been reported at valuations between 280% and 340% above their actual appraised worth on loan applications submitted across a 14-month period. 3 separate lenders, 2 separate LLCs, both registered to Marcus Webb. The 2 North Shore developers who had been at the Lakeview South event did not return his calls after the investigation became public record. A development firm in Wicker Park that had been in late-stage negotiations with him pulled out within 60 days. Webb Realty Associates closed its Michigan Avenue office by the end of the 7th month. The license review was still ongoing. It did not happen because of Do-hyun. It did not happen because of Jin-soo's rejection at the groundbreaking. It happened because the structure Marcus had built his professional life on had always been load-bearing fiction, and load-bearing fiction eventually encounters weight. Simone found out through Claire, who found out through a client who worked adjacent to one of the lenders. She read the summary. She felt something, not satisfaction, not relief, something quieter and less satisfying than either. The particular feeling of watching of a consequence arrive that you saw coming long before it did. She did not call anyone about it. She filed it away and went back to work. She had sent the email to Jin-soo 6 weeks after the parking garage on Wabash. It had taken her that long. Not to decide, but to be sure she was deciding for the right reasons. She did not want to reach out because she felt guilty. She did not want to reach out because she had learned the truth about Do-hyun's portfolio and thought it changed the calculation. She wanted to reach out because she had a concept for the Harrington District shared spaces that she had been developing quietly for 14 months, and because it was the best work she had ever done, and because it did deserve to be seen by the people building the project it was designed for. The email was 4 sentences. No apology, no reference to their personal history, just the project, the concept, an attachment, and a request for a meeting if Kang Meridian was still in the design selection phase. Jin-soo replied in 3 hours. Yes, Thursday 10 a.m. The address on Michigan and Wacker. The office was on the 14th floor, not the penthouse, not the corner suite. A mid-floor conference room with a rectangular table, 6 chairs, a window facing north, clean, functional, unremarkable. The kind of room that says, what happens here matters more than the room itself. Jin-soo was there when she arrived. Do-hyun came in 2 minutes later, dark sweater, coffee in hand, no ceremony. He set the coffee down, pulled out a chair, sat. Go ahead, he said. She presented for 22 minutes, boards printed at full-scale digital backup on her laptop. She walked them through the courtyard concept first, the material palette, the sight lines, the way natural light would move through the space at different hours. Then the lobby. Then the corridor transitions between commercial and residential that most designers treated as afterthoughts, and she had treated as the core problem. Do-hyun asked 3 questions. All technical. All exactly the right questions. The kind that show someone has understood what you built and wants to know if you understood it too. She answered all 3. He looked at the boards for a moment, then he nodded once. We'll move forward with this. Jin-soo will send the contract by Thursday. He stood, extended his hand. She shook it, professional. Correct, the right distance. She walked to the elevator alone, pressed the button, stood in the quiet of the 14th floor hallway while it came. She did not feel the uncomplicated relief she had imagined she might feel. What she felt was more specific, the particular satisfaction of having done a hard thing correctly, of having come back to a room not as the person who left it badly, but as the professional she had always been capable of being. The elevator opened. She got in. The permit was finalized on the first Thursday of March. Do-hyun drove to the Harrington site alone before the crew. 6:02 a.m. The Ford Transit, 118,000 miles now, the scratch on the rear door still unrepaired. He pulled through the gate and sat for a moment with the engine off. The building was 6 floors of steel and concrete and engineered wood, rising above the South Paulina street line against a sky that hadn't decided yet between gray and blue. Commercial base, residential above, the courtyard space framed in but not yet finished. Simone's courtyard, the one she'd designed through 14 months of everything else, the one that was going to be the best thing about this building when it was done. He got out, poured coffee from the thermos, walked to the permit board on the chain-link fence. Harrington District Revitalization Project. Principal developer, Do-hyun Kang, Kang Meridian Group, his name, in the correct field, on a document anyone could read. He stood there for a while. He was thinking about his father, not the man who had built the network, not the man whose choices had taken 4 years to carefully undo. He was thinking about the man in the Hyde Park study in the last months, sitting by the window in the afternoon light, who had looked at his son and said, clean it up. Not as a command, as a hope. As the closest thing to an apology a man like Kang Sungul knew how to offer. He was still cleaning. He would be for a while yet. But this building, this name on this board, this block of Southside Chicago, that was going to have something on it worth having. This was part of it. Then the crew van pulled through the gate, and someone called Morning D, and he lifted his coffee and turned toward the site. There was work to do. The permit document in the plastic sleeve on the fence was a standard city form, dense with technical language, reference numbers, zoning classifications, contractor designations. His name appeared once near the bottom of the second column, in the same font size as everything around it. Not prominent, not announced, just there, exactly where it was supposed to be. If you made it to the end of this story, I want to ask you something. Not about Du-hyun, not about Marcus, about Simone. Because I think she's the most honest character in this story. Not because she made the right choice, but because most of us have been her at some point. We've looked at someone through the wrong lens. We've mistaken performance for substance, or silence for emptiness, or the absence of display for the absence of depth. We've let other people's metrics become our own without noticing the handoff. The hard thing about Simone's story isn't the ending. The ending is fine. She gets the contract, she does good work, she moves forward. The hard thing is the middle, the part where she had to sit in a parking garage at midnight and admit, alone, with no audience and no narrative payoff in sight, that she had been measuring the wrong things. That part doesn't make the highlight reel, but that part is where everything actually changed. So tell me in the comments, have you ever confused quiet with empty? Have you ever looked back at a decision and understood it differently only after the distance? I read every single comment. This is the part of making these stories that I actually look forward to. If the story made you feel something, if it made you think about someone or something or some version of yourself, share it. Not for the algorithm, because someone in your life might need to hear it. And if you're not subscribed yet, come on. You've made it this far. Hit the button. There's more where this came from. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.